Hey 5A, happy Monday. I'm at school recording because I wanted to be able to use the whiteboard. Okay, today we're going to do chapters 33 through 38 in Maniac McGee. I know my camera is crooked, but I can't really fix it and I really don't care. So, all right. So in your bookmark pages, we're going to start with the word, what are we on? Solitary, page 121. I should find these words before I start videotaping, but I never do. Maniac drifted from hour to hour, day to day, alone with his memories, a stunned and solitary wanderer. Next word is non-perishable, also on page 121. He returned only long enough to pick up a few things, a blanket, some non-perishable food, the glove, and as many books as he could squeeze into his old back satchel. Next word is nonchalantly, page 133. John walked out, nonchalantly munching. I was busy. The next one is signify, that is page 139. Maniac took all of his glory, or all of this to signify a deal. A portal, also page 139. They saw him climb the 3 cement steps to the white door, the portal of death. Perilous, page 142. And then one day they gave him the most perilous challenge of all. They dared him to go into the East End. Next one is forlorn, page 143. You can't see this one. Oh, forlorn, marooned on concrete and asphalt, no place to burrow. April's orphans. And then marooned, page 143. I just read that too. They varied the very places where they didn't belong. Forlorn, marooned on concrete, asphalt, no place to burrow. All right, going back to the boards. Again, I'm going to go fast because you don't always pause them. So, solitary means lone. Non-perishable, items that do not spoil easily. Nonchalantly is casually. Signify, to be a sign of. Portal is the entrance. Perilous is dangerous. Forlorn is lonely and sad. And marooned is to abandon and leave without aid or resources. When you're done with this, you're going to go to your grammar. We are on a page that we've already started. Starts on page chapter 33. I'm going to do number 1 with you. Then your homework is going to be number 2 on this page, and then the whole entire next page. But that's the sentences on the next page are not very long. All right. So number 1 on chapter 33. Maniac drifted from hour to hour to day to day, alone with his memories, a stunned and solitary wanderer. So maniac needs to be capitalized. Maniac drifted from hour to hour, comma, day to day, comma, alone with his memories, comma, a stunned and solitary wanderer. And this is a adjective because it is describing something. All right, I'm going to read to you. We're going to finish the book tomorrow. So again, follow along, or you can like meet me and you can read to yourself. Chapter 33. Remember, we just read that Grayson died. So, and he started to run after the funeral because no one showed up. Page 121. January of that year was too cold and dry for snow. It was a month of frozen hardness of ice. Maniac drifted. Oh, let me pause here for a second too. You can make sure you're doing the questions in your folder. Page, it'll be chapters 33, and it goes on to the next page as well. And a page after that. So you do have a lot of homework, but you can do this while I'm reading to you. Okay. Maniac drifted from hour to hour, day to day, alone with his memories, a stunned and solitary wanderer. He ate only to keep from starving, warmed his body only enough to keep it from freezing to death, ran only because there was no reason to stop. Even if the superintendent had allowed it, he could not have brought himself to stay at the bandshell. He returned only long enough to pick up a few things, a blanket, some non-perishable food, the glove, and as many books as he could squeeze into the old back satchel that had hauled Grayson's belongings around the minor leagues. Before he left for good, he got some paint and angrily brushed over the 101 on the door. During these days, he ran, usually a slow jog, but sometimes he would suddenly sprint, furious 10 or 20-second bursts as though trying to leave himself behind. Sometimes he walked, he crossed and recrossed the river. He wandered in all directions through the surrounding communities and townships, Bridgeport, Showood, East Norriton, West Norriton, Jeffersonville, Plymouth, Rochester. Whenever he crossed a bridge over to Schuylkill, he turned his eyes so as not to see the nearby P&W trestle. Even so, in his mind's eye, he saw the red and yellow trolley carrying from the high track, plunging into the water, killing his parents over and over. After a while, he stopped crossing the bridge. Other than that, he went wherever there was room to go forward, along roads and alleys and railroad tracks, across fields and cemeteries and golf courses. From high above, a tracing of his routes, would have looked as hopelessly tangled as cobble's knot. By nightfall, he was back in 2 miles. He would retrieve the satchel from wherever he had stashed it and find a place to endure the night. A few times he revisited the buffalo pen, where he covered himself with a second blanket of straw. Other times overnight quarters might be abandoned car, an empty garage, a basement stairwell. When his original supply of food ran out, he fed himself at the zoo or at the soup kitchen down the Salvation Army. He did odd jobs for housewives, ran errands for shopkeepers. He would not beg. One day he found himself among monuments and cannons in rolling hills. He was in Valley Forge. Here the Continental Army has suffered through a winter of their own. The vast, dark, frozen desolation itself seemed a more proper monument than statues and stones. The only buildings here were tiny log and mortar cabins, replicas of the Army shelters. Maniac could feel the ache swelling outward from his breast and filling the enormous bounding spaces. He returned to town for the satchel and put himself up in one of the cabins. It was scarcely bigger than a large doghouse. The floor was dirt. There was doorway but no door. Several saltines fell from the blanket. He threw them outside. Let the birds have them. He wrapped himself in the blanket and lay down. He lay there all night and all the next day. Dreams pursued memories, courted and danced and coupled with them, and they became one. And the gaunt, bee-sheeting phantoms that called to him, and the rag-warped feet of Washington's regulars, and the faces of his mother and father, and Aunt Dot and Uncle Dan, and the Beals and Earl Grayson. And in that bedeviled army, there would have no more recruits. No one else would orphan him. The second evening came and went. Maniac never stirred, knowing it would not be fast or easy, and wanting and deserving nothing less. Grimly, patiently, he waited for death. The question in your folder is, why is Maniac so angry? And what is Maniac doing at the end of the chapter? 34. It was during the second night in the cabin that he heard the little voices. They were not soldiers' voices. I'm going on this one. No, that one. That one's bigger. I'm tired. I'm stopping. You stupid meatball. It's right there. And there are 2 seconds. I'm staying. Great, you beef jerky. Stay. I'm going to that one. Good night. Silence. Then, hold on. I'm coming. That was all. The ghostly soldiers returned, their haunted eyes seeking warmth, food, and life. There was no morning, only daylight in the doorway. He pushed himself up, dragged himself outside the building, the blinding light. The saltines lay in the brown frozen grass. The next cabin was nearby. January slipped an icy finger under his collar and down his back. He pulled a blanket tighter about himself, but it was too late. The finger had touched the last warm coal in his hearth, and his body, feigning the ember, shook itself violently. He walked to the next cabin, looked inside, and saw a body huddled in the corner. An eye opened, stared at him. Then in succession, 2 more eyes opened. The body divided and became 2 little boys. Get a load of this, Meatball, said one with the front tooth missing. He walks around with a blanket on. Hey, Meatball, why don't you bring your mattress along, too? And your pillow, too, screeched the other. Then Missing Tooth whipped off his woolen cap and smacked Screecher in the face. Screecher retaliated, and Maniac had to step back while the 2 kid tornadoes swirled around the cabin. When they finished, they rolled onto their backs, shook their legs at the ceiling, and laughed as long as they had fought. The volume coming from Screecher was incredible, as though a microphone was embedded in his throat. Finally, Missing Tooth rediscovered the stranger standing in the doorway. Hey, Meatball, you running away too? No, not really, Maniac replied. Well, we are, went Screecher. Where are you going? Maniac said. The answer came from both. Mexico. Maniac bit back a grin. When they stood, he saw they couldn't have been more than 4 feet tall or 8 years old. Well, he said, it's good and warm down there, but it's pretty far, you know. Yeah, we know, growled Missing Tooth. You know we're meatballs like you. He grabbed a supermarket bag in the corner, opened it. Look, it was filled with candy, cupcakes, pies, even a pack of butterscotch crimpets. Maniac's stomach rasped against itself. He remembered how thirsty he was. Where'd you get all this? We stole it, Screecher blurted. The other smacked him with his cap. Shut up, Piper, you stupid sausage. You don't go telling people you stole stuff. Piper returned the cap slap. You shut up, Russell. I didn't tell him where he stole it. This time they fought was over in less than a minute, but it started up again when Maniac asked where they were from, and Piper said 2 mills, and Russell said, shut up, he might be a cop, and bopped him good. When they settled down, they stared at him warily. Piper snickered. He ain't no cop, he's a kid. Yeah, sneered Russell, that's how much you know. They got cops that look like kids, that's how they catch kids. They stared at him some more. They moved in cautiously, one on either side. They opened his blanket, then patted him all over. What we're doing this for, Piper wanted to know. We're feeling for a gun, Russell explained. Oh. After the patting, they backed off. So, said Russell, you ain't a cop? Not me, said Maniac. He moved in from the doorway. And with only a moment's pause, the story came to him. A pizza delivery boy. We had a contest every week, and the 2 of you were chosen for a free pizza. The 2 gave to each other. We were? Yep, a large. Where is it? Demanded Russell, glancing around. At Cobble's Corner. You have 24 hours to claim your prize. He waited while they bickered over what to do. Valley Forge was a good 5 or 6 miles from 2 mills. These kids might not have made it to Mexico, but they had come a long way and stayed overnight, and someone, somewhere, must be worried sick about them. He had a feeling they weren't kidding about stealing the food. He figured he better help them make up their minds. You know, he said, you're taking the long way to Mexico. If you come back to 2 mills with me, I'll show you a shortcut. That did it. Soon the 3 of them were trekking past the Washington Memorial Chapel, Russell and Piper with their bag, Maniac with his satchel. It was early afternoon when they walked into Cobble's Corner at Hector and Birch. Maniac produced his certificate for conquering Cobble's Knot, and 20 minutes later, the young runaways were attacking a large pizza with pepperoni. Maniac confined himself to 3 glasses of water and a half a dozen crimpets. The boys agreed with Maniac that they ought to stay the night in their own house before setting back for Mexico in the morning. They were barely a block from Cobble's when Maniac heard a familiar voice. Bellowing and barreling down the street was a fearsome, fast bowler, king of cobras, Big John McNabb himself, and he was roaring mad. Maniac might have taken off, but he found himself clung to and clutched by the 2 little urchins. They huddled behind him like babies on a possum's back as Giant John came red-faced and huffing up to them. Where you been? He yelled. As Maniac considered what to say, the urchins peeped from behind him. We wasn't no place, John. We was right here. We was with this here kid, and he ain't no cop either. We checked him out. For the first time, Great John looked straight at Maniac, a smile across his face. Well, well, the frogman. The smile vanished. So what do you do with my little brothers? Question, why did Maniac bring the boys back for pizza? 35. It took a while for everything to get straightened out. First, Giant John had to be convinced that Maniac was not kidnapping his brothers. Then the brothers had to do some more trembling and clinging while John finished lambasting them for running away, which apparently they did about every other week. Then, when the brothers found out that their pizza person was none other than the famous Maniac McGee, the very same one who had blasted their big brother's fastball to smithereens and finished him off with a home run frog, well, it took a good 5 minutes of rolling on the sidewalk to get all the laughing out of their systems, which of course got Giant John more than a little steamed, prompting Maniac, who didn't like seeing John disgraced before his little brothers, to say, yeah, but didn't John tell you what happened the next day? And the brother said, no, what? And Giant John said, huh? And Maniac winked at John and crossed his fingers. Sure, John, you remember. Wink, wink. At the Little League field the next day, you said I was lucky that all you threw me was fastballs because you weren't ready to reveal your secret pitch, the one you've been working on, remember? Wink. McNabb nodded dumbly. And so I said, come on. I can't hit anything. Pitch it to me. And you pitched it, and I missed it by a mile, and you kept pitching it to me all day long, and I never even hit a foul ball on it. What was the pitch? Changed the urchins. It was. Maniac paused for dramatic buildup. The stop ball. The stop ball? Yeah, and you should have seen it. It comes right up to the plate, looking as fat and easy to belt, and then, just when you take your swing, Maniac got into the batter's stance and demonstrated. It sort of stops, and your bat just whips the air. He whipped at an imaginary stop ball. Wow, said the brothers, gazing up at their big brother. And so Maniac was invited to accompany their brothers McNabb to their home. Despite the cold, the front door was wide open, and Maniac could smell the inside before he could see it. The first thing he did see was a yellow, short-haired mongrel looking innocently up at him while taking a leak in the middle of the living room floor. Clean that up, John ordered Russell. Clean that up, Russell ordered Piper. Piper just walked on by. After closing the door, which was surprisingly heavy, Maniac found a stack of newspapers in the corner. He laid some over the puddle to soak in that gave himself a tour of the downstairs. Maniac had seen some amazing things in his lifetime, but nothing as amazing as that house. From the smell of it, he knew this wasn't the first time an animal had relieved itself on the rugless floor. In fact, in another corner, he stopped a form of relief that could have been soaked up by newspapers. Cans and bottles lay over, along with crusts, peelings, cores, scrapes, rinds, wrappers, everything you would normally find in a garbage can, and everywhere there was raisins. As he walked through the dining room, an old tennis ball, hit him in the top of the head and bounced away. He looked up into the laughing faces of Russell and Piper. The hole in the ceilings was so big they could both have jumped through it at once. He ran a hand along one wall. The peeling paint came off like cornflakes. Nothing could be worse than living in dining rooms, yet the kitchen was. A jar of peanut butter had crashed to the floor. Someone had gotten a running start, jumped into it, and skidded the brown, one-footed tracks to the stove. On the table were what appeared to be the remains of an autopsy performed upon a large bird, possibly a crow. The refrigerator contained 2 food groups, mustard and beer. The raisins here were even more abundant. He spotted several of them moving. They weren't raisins, they were roaches. The front door opened, and seconds later a man clomped to the kitchen. He wore no winter jacket, only a sleeveless green sweatshirt, which ballooned over his enormous stomach. Tattoos blued his upper arms. His hands were nearly pure black, stale body odor mingling with that of fries and burgers coming from the Burger King bag he had held. Dropping the bag next to the bird remains, he bellowed, "Chow," and took a beer from the fridge. He downed a good half of it in one swig, belched, double-clutched, and belched again. He had to know someone besides himself was standing in the kitchen, and just as obviously, he didn't care. 2 quaking crashes came from the dining room. Gummerno. Russell and Piper had taken a direct route via the hole. What'd you bring, Dad? Whoppers? Yeah, Whoppers. They tore into the bag like jackals and to Kieran. Plastic flew, fries flew. They both wanted the same Whopper. Mashed between their tugging fists, the Whopper splurted sauce and cheese and pickle chips. Then it split. Russell lurched backward to the kitchen table with his half. Piper lurched backward to the opposite direction, and with nothing to stop him, sailed right through the cellar doorway and down the cellar steps. The final thud was followed by a truck horn blast of Piper's laugh. When John ambled in, the father said, "Get the blocks?" "No," grunted John, pulling out a pair of Whoppers. He tossed one to Maniac. "We need more," growled the father. John didn't answer. "We need more." "I heard." McNabb smashed the tabletop. 3 fries and a bird wing jumped to the floor. "Now." John walked out, nonchalantly munching. "I was busy." The rest of the night was scenes from a Looney movie. Scene: McNabb, the father, swaggers bare-armed out of the front door, bellowing back, "Do your homework." Scene. Maniac retrieves the wet newspapers from the living room. There are no wastebaskets in the house. He finds a trash can in the backyard next to a pile of cinder blocks. He dumps the soggy papers in a can, which is empty. Scene. Small turds of an unfamiliar shape appear here and there along baseboards of the first floor. Please don't be rats, Maniac prays. Scene. The cobras come in. They glare at Maniac, but Giant John tells them to lay off. They raid the fridge for beer. They smoke cigarettes. They belch and fart. They curse. Russell and Piper, kitty cobras, pop their own beer cans, guzzle, swagger, belch, smoke, curse. Scene. Football game. From the front of the living room to the back of the dining room, except for space, it has everything a regular game has. Running, passing, blocking, tackling, kicking. There's a little furniture to get in the way. Ordinarily, the windows wouldn't last 5 minutes, but the windows of this house were boarded up with plywood. Body-blotched cobras fly into the walls. The house flinches. Scene. A faint rustle noise behind the stove. Oh, no rats! Maniac dares to look. It's a turtle, box turtle, munching on an old whopper lettuce. Phew. Scene. The boys' bedroom. Russell and Piper lie prone at the hole. They fire toy submachine guns, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta, at the cobras heading out the front door. Piper jumps up and blows Maniac away, killing him at least 15 times. This is how we're gonna do it. Bam, bam, bam. The guns will be real, says Russell, still prone and firing, the stock of the toy gun tied against his cheek. Yeah, squawks Piper, real. He flops back to the floor, sprays the hole downstairs. Soon they start coming in. Bam, bam, bam. Who, says Maniac. The enemy, says Russell. Who's that, says Maniac. Russell stops firing long enough to send Maniac a where have you been look. Who do you think? He sneers. He points the red barrel of the submachine gun toward the bedroom door, toward the east end, the heavy front door. Scene. Darkness. Silence. Sometime early morning. Maniac lies between the two brothers on the bed. Do cockroaches climb bedposts? Unable to sleep, asking himself, what am I doing here? Remembering Hester and Lester in his lap, Grayson's hug, corn muffin in the toaster oven, thinking, who is the orphan here anyway? Hearing as he last lowers himself to sleep's deep water, a door slams. A slurred voice. Do your homework. Fearing, will I float? 35 has 2 questions. Describe the McNabb house, and who do the boys say is the enemy? All right, chapter 36. I'm going to clean next really quick. All right, the deal was, if Russell and Piper went to school for the rest of the week, Maniac would show them the shortcut to Mexico on Saturday. He figured if they all managed to survive till then, he'd come up with something. On Saturday, the boys had their paper bag packed, and Maniac had a new deal. Go to school for another week, and he'd treat them to another large pizza. Besides, he said, crossing his fingers, that there's volcano season down in Mexico. The whole place was a sheet of red-hot lava. Better wait till it cools down. They bought it, and they bought the same deal the following week. But school was still agony for the boys. It had to be worth more than a pizza week. But what? Their brothers thought about it, and soon began to realize that the answer was sleeping between them every night. Ever since the famous Maniac McGee had showed up at their house, Russell and Piper McNabb had become famous in their own right. Other kids were always crowding around, pelting down with questions. What's he like? What's he say? What's he do? Did he really sit on Fitzwaller's front steps? Is he really that fast? Kids started giving them knots, sneaker laces, yo-yo strings, toys, and saying, ask Maniac to undo this, will ya? Really little kids referred to him as Mr. Maniac. The McNabbs ate it up. In the streets, the playground, school, the attention, not the pizza, was the real reason they put up with school each day. They began to feel something that they had never felt before. They began to feel important. What a wonderful thing, this importance. Waiting for them the moment they woke up in the morning, pumping them up like basketballs, giving them bounce. And they didn't even have to steal it. They loved it. The more they had, the more they wanted. And so when Maniac tried to cut the next pizza for a school deal, Russell answered no. No, echoed Maniac, who had been afraid it would come to this. No, said Russell. We want something else. Oh, said Maniac, what's that? They told him. If he wanted another week's worth of school out for them, he would have to enter Fitzwaller's backyard and stay there for 10 minutes, screeched Piper, who shuddered at the very thought. When Maniac casually answered, okay, it's a deal, Piper ran shrieking from the house. On the next Saturday morning, Russell, Piper, Maniac set out for the Fitzwaller's house about 7 blocks away. They took the alleys. Along the way, they were joined by other kids who were waiting their eyes at once, fearful and excited. By the time they got to Fitzwaller's backyard, at least 15 kids huddled against the garage door on the far side of the alley. Maniac didn't hesitate. He walked straight up to the back gate, opened it, and went in. Not only that, he went all the way to the center of the yard, turned, folded his arms, smiled, and called, who's keeping time? Russell, his throat too dry to speak, raised his hand. For 10 minutes, 15 kids and possibly the universe held their breath. The only sounds were inside their heads, the moaning and wailing of the ghosts of all the poor slobs who ever blundered into Fitzwallace's property. The utter amazement of all when Russell finally croaked, "Time!" Maniac McGee was still there, alive, smiling, apparently unharmed. Even more amazing, he didn't come out. Instead, he said, "Say, you guys, how about adding to this deal? If I do something else while I'm here, will you make it the next 2 weeks at school?" "What are you going to do?" stammered Russell. Maniac thought for a minute, then announced, "I'll knock on the front door." Five kids, Fitzwallace on the spots. Several others screamed, "No, don't do it." Piper went into some sort of fit and began kicking the garage door. Russell zoned out. Maniac took all of this to signify a deal. He hopped the backyard fence and strolled around front. The others went back down the alley and around the long way. They stationed themselves not only across the street, but almost halfway up the block. And even then, they squeezed together in a bunch, as though if they allowed any space between them, Fitzwallace might somehow pick them off one by one. They huddled, trembling, to bear witness to the last seconds of Maniac McGee's life. They saw him stand directly in front of the red brick, 3-story house, the bile green window shades. They saw him climb the 3 cement steps to the white door and portal of death. They saw him raise his hand, and though they were too far away to hear, they saw him knock upon the door, and 15 heartbeats in time to that sudden knocking. The door opened. Fitzwallace's door opened. Not much, but enough so the witnesses could make out a thin strip of blackness. Would Maniac be sucked into the black hole like so much lint into a vacuum cleaner? Would Fitzwallace's long, bony hand dart out, quick as a lizard's tongue, and snatch poor Maniac? Maniac appeared to be speaking to the dark crack. Was he pleading for his life? Would his last words be skewered like a marshmallow by Fitzwallace's tipped cane? Apparently not. The door closed. Maniac bounded down the steps and came jogging toward them, grinning. 3 kids bolted. Sure, he was a ghost. The others stayed. They invented excuses to touch him, to see if he was still himself, still warm, but they weren't positively certain until later, when they watched him devour a pack of butterscotch crimpets. 36 questions are, what feeling did Maniac bring to McNabbs? Explain. And what do you think Maniac talked to Fitzwallace about? Chapter 37. Thus began a series of heroic feats by Maniac McGee. At 20 paces, he hit a telephone pole with a stone 61 times in a row. When the once-a-week freight train hit Elm Street, he started running from the Oriole Street dead end on one rail and beat the train to the park, no sweat. He took off his sneaks and socks and walked, nonchalant as you please, through the rat-infested dump at the foot of Rifle Hill. The mysterious hole down by the creek, the one you would never reach into, even if you dropped your most valuable possession into it. He stuck his hand in, his arm in, all the way to the elbow, kept it there for the longest 60 seconds on record, and pulled it out, dirty, but still full of fingers. He climbed the fence at the American Bison pen at the zoo. He had suggested this feat himself, everyone else scoffing, and, while the mother looked on, kissed the baby buffalo. So it went through February and March of that year, and a feat a week. Too much of the town hearing about these things. It was a simple case of the legend adding to itself, doing what legends do. To Russell and Piper McNabb, it was a case of boosting their importance ever higher in the eyes of the other kids. Was it not at the brothers' direction that Maniac McGee performed these deeds? And who, after all, is more amazing, the Lion or the Tamer? As for Maniac, he understood early on that he was being used for the greater glory of Piper and Russell. He also understood that without him, they would not be going to school every day. For the McNabbs, there was nothing free about public education. A tuition had to be paid. Every week, Maniac paid it, and because he loved to meet the challenges that they cooked up for him. And then one day, they gave him the most perilous challenge of all. They dared him to go into the East End. 37 question is, what do you think Maniac's reaction will be to the challenge of going to the East End? I don't think he's going to really worry about it because he's already been there, right? All right, one more chapter. This is a long one. I'm sorry. But I want to get the book done so we can work on our project and other stuff. All right, 38. The witnesses, there were twice 15 this time, went with him as far as Hector Street. They halted at the curb. He crossed the street and went on along. Piper megaphoned after him. "Maniac, come back! We were just kidding. You don't have to." Maniac just waved and went on. He knew he should be feeling afraid of these East Enders, these so-called black people, but he wasn't. It was himself he was afraid of any trouble he might cause just by being there. It was the day of the worms, the first almost warm after the rainy and night day in April, when you bolt from your house to find yourself in a world of worms. They were as numerous here in the East End as they had been in the West. The sidewalks, the streets, the very places where they didn't belong. Forlorn, marooned in concrete and asphalt, no place to burrow. April's orphans. Once when he was little in Holliesburg, He had gone along with his toy wheelbarrow, carefully lifting them with borrowed kitchen fork until the barrel was full, then dumped them into Mr. Snavely's compost pile. And sure as the worms followed the rain, the kids followed the worms. West End, East End, they had poured from their houses onto the cool, damp sidewalks. And as they got the worms any notice, it was only when they squashed one underfoot. And so as Maniac moved through the East End, he felt the presence of not one but two populations, both occupying the same territory, yet each unmindful of the other, one yelping and playing and chasing and laughing, the other lost in silence and dying by the millions. "You old fish belly!" Maniac snapped to. He glanced at the street sign. He was 4 blocks from Hector, deep into the east. Mars Bar came jip driving toward him, taller than before, bigger, but still squalling. "Hey, fish, thought you was gone." Maniac turned to face him fully. Mars Bars did not stop until he was inside Maniac's phone booth of space, inches from his face. They locked eyes levelly. Maniac thinking, "I must be growing too," he said. "I'm back." The skull fiercened. "Maybe nobody told you. I'm badder than ever. I'm getting badder every day. I'm almost afraid to wake up in the morning." He leaned in closer because of how bad I might have gotten overnight. Maniac smiled, nodded. "Yeah, you're bad, Mars." He gave a sniff. His smile went as little smirky. "And I'm getting so bad myself, I think I must be half black." Mars' eyes bulged. He backed off. The skull collapsed, and he howled with laughter. His buddies, who were hanging back, stared dumbly. As Mars unwound from his laughter fit, he studied Maniac up and down, aware, too, that Maniac was studying him. When he could speak again, he said, "Still them raggedy clothes, huh, fish?" He lifted 1 foot pose. "I see you looking like them kicks just got 'em." Maniac nodded. "Nice." They were more than nice. They were beautiful. The best, yes, the baddest sneaks he had ever seen. Way better than anything Grayson could have afforded. "I forgot to tell you something else too, fish." "What's that?" "I'm fast. I'm faster. I've been working out. I got my new boss kicks." He sprinted in place, arms and legs pistoling to a blur. He stopped. He jabbed a finger at Maniac's nose, pressed it, flattening the soft end of it. "See? Guess you're right. Now at least you got a black nose." He laughed. They both laughed. Everybody laughed. Then Mars turned Scully again, saying, "But you ain't black enough or bad enough to beat the Mars man. We gonna race, honky donkey." The race was set up at Plum Street, the long level block between Ash and Jackson. By the time they were ready, half the kids in the East End were there. From the tiniest peepsqueaks to the high schoolers, the little kids ran races of their own from curb to curb. The bigger kids shouldered blasters and dug into their jeans for coins to bet with. For the first time since last fall, mothers opened windows and leaned out from second stories. Traffic was detoured from both ends of the block. No one could find string for the finish, so a second-story mother dropped down a spool of bright pink thread. Another problem was the start. First, they had to find chalk to draw the starting line. Then they did. Nobody could seem to draw it straight. The result, a stack of starting line creeping up the street till someone brought you a yardstick and did it right. The next problem came when the starter, Bump Gillen, was also Mars Bar's best pal, called, "Get ready," and someone in the crowd yelled, "That way you," and the way you say, "Take your mark." Well, everybody jumped into it then. There was shoving and jawing and almost a fist fight over the proper way to start a race. Finally, there was a compromise, and Bump called, "Get ready on your mark," at which point somebody else called, "Go Mars," and Bump turned and snarled, "Shut up." When the starter starts, there's no noise, so naturally somebody else called, "Smoke 'em, Mars," and then came, "Waste some, Mars," and "Do the honk, barman," and they might still be calling to this day, had not a single voice separated itself from the others. "Burn 'em, Miggy." It was hands down, laughing and pointing from his perch in the front roof of his car. Bump jumped in the let-up. "Get, set, go!" And at long last, mossy from their weight of the starting line, they went. Even as the race began, after it began, Maniac wasn't sure how to run it. Naturally, he wanted to win, or at least to do his best. All his instincts told him that. But there was other considerations, whom he was racing against, and where, and what the consequences might be if he won. These were heavy considerations, heavy enough to slow him down, until the hysterical crowd and the sight of Mars Bar's sneaker bottoms and boiling of his own blood ignited his afterburners, and before you could say, "Burn him, McGee," he was ahead, the pink thread bobbing in his sight, but he never saw his body break the thread. He only saw the face of Mars Bar, straining, gasping, unbelieving, losing. They went crazy. They went wild. They went totally bananas. You see him? He turned around. He ran backwards. He did it backwards. He bit him going backwards. Mars Bars tried. He shoved Bump. "You started too fast. I wasn't ready." He shoved the thread holders. "You moved it up so he could win. I was gaining on you." He shoved Maniac. "You bumped me. You got a false start. You cheated." But his protests drowned in the pandemonium. "Why did I do that?" was all Maniac could think. He hadn't even realized it till he crossed the line, and he regretted it instantly. Wasn't it enough just to win? Did he have to disgrace his opponent as well? Had he done it deliberately to pay back Marsbar for all his nastiness, to show him up and shut him up for once and for all? His only recollection was a feeling of sheer joyful exuberance, himself in celebration, shouting amen in the Bethany church, bashing John McNabb's fastballs out of sight, dancing a polka with Grayson. Maybe it was that simple. After all, who asked why otters toboggan down mud banks? But that didn't make it any less stupid or rotten a thing to do. The hatred in Marsbar's eyes was no longer for a white kid in the East End. It was for Geoffrey McGee, period. The crowd surged with him as he made his way westward. It wasn't clear whether they were glad or not that he had won, only that they had seen someone to set them off. They jostled and jammed and high-fived and jived. For everyone who called him White Lightning, two more challenged him to race. Right here, baby. You and me. See, we're going to turn his back on whom? Maniac kept moving, embarrassed, wishing he could just break out and sprint for the West End, wishing he could duck into the Beals' house and be sanctuaried there and not fear reprisals on them. And just about then, miraculously, two little hands were warming into his, two familiar voices squealing, Maniac, Maniac, Hester and Lester. He snatched them up, one on each arm. It was on Sycamore Street. There was the house, the door opening, Amanda and Mrs. Beals smiling to beat the band. 38. What do you think the consequences will be for Maniac for winning the race? Okay, so your homework is going to be the grammar and then the questions if you did not do it while I was reading to you. Take a picture of the grammar and put it into the document. I will see you guys later.